good day to everybody, and welcome to the second track of Insight 2020, focusing on supply chains. This is Pramay Rao from Smartkarma's research team, and I'm thrilled to introduce MuthuKumar, the Group CFO of Olam International. Muthu is an experienced finance and IT professional with deep domain experience in the agricultural commodity industry and exposure to doing business across the globe in 65 countries, harnessed through his more than 20 years at Olam. Muthu, over to you. I'm just going to be sharing your slide deck in a second.
Thank you, Pranav. Good day to all of you. I'm delighted to be here to share our perspective and experience in these highly uncertain times, and whatever we can in providing some amount of takeaway as end of this session would be our endeavor on supply chain resilience. I will jump into the presentation straight away and go to the next slide. A bit of a background about Olam International. We are headquartered in Singapore. We started in 1989. We are a 30-year-old organization. We are primarily an industry-leading food ingredient business, and which has got 5 big platforms, and also a very differentiated global agri business with footprint across more than 60 countries, with employees more than 70,000, with 25,000 plus customers, more than 150 plus processing assets across 26 countries, more than 260,000 hectareage under direct upstream operations, and engagement with 4.8 million farmers stroke suppliers across the globe. And you can see here that we participate in across all parts of the value chain, whether it is upstream, supply chain, midstream or downstream. And we have very strong global leadership positions in many of the commodities that we deal in, be it the #1 global almond grower, or a #1 global cashew supplier, or a global #1 dehydrated onion and garlic supplier, and also organic supplier in the US. We are a #1 global cocoa trader and exporter. We are also a top 2 global coffee supplier, and we own more than 2.8 million hectares of FSC certified tropical forest in Republic of Congo, and we are the #2 global rice supplier. We are also the #2 global cotton merchant and the largest wheat miller in Nigeria and Ghana. Now, you can also see that we don't have a dogma of participating in all parts of the value chain across all these commodities, but we do selective upstream. We are predominantly present in all parts of supply chain for these majority of commodities, but we also are selectively present in mid and downstream. Next slide, please. So this is an overview of how a typical agri-commodity supply chain looks at, and it is also relevant for many of the other supply chain industries. If you look at the ones which are in blue, dark blue, talks about the supply chain activities, the various supply chain activities, the plantation, the origination, the primary processing, and the value-added or manufacturing activities. All of these typically what I talked about upstream supply chain, mid and downstream activities. And you can see that in many of these, what are color-coded in green are primarily Olam's own core activities. So we participate in the procurement part in terms of our own Olam managed plantations and outgrower programs. We are also closely working with local buying agents at the farm level, at the village level, small towns level, and directly source raw material from and aggregate them and manage inland warehousing and freighting, and then take to logical grouping at tier 2 towns or cities or into the port cities. And where applicable, we do primary processing in our own primary processing plants. We have our dedicated sales and marketing personnel who ensure that we are able to either distribute domestically in that geography or manage marine logistics to export to various parts of the world. In addition, we also provide value-added services in terms of risk management and vendor managed inventories at destination to support large customers who want assured quality check just-in-time inventories. And in today's uncertain times, and that has been a big boon to many of our large customers where they are facing comparatively lesser supply chain disruptions because of our ability to have vendor managed inventories closer to the factories in variety of destinations. And finally, in terms of value-added manufacturing where we are present, we ensure that in our own factories, many of them are certified at the highest quality level for food safety, quality assurance, research and development. And we have secondary processing plants and also to package food manufacturing across key West African geographies. One more tab, please. Now, when you are looking at COVID-19, Olam was not spared from these disruptions. And the one that you see in red at the bottom of the slide clearly highlights what kind of disruption that we have gone through. In terms of the upstream plantation origination part, we have gone through a seasonal activity disruption. We have had, in some cases, demand-supply mismatches. We have had freight delays because of access to logistics infrastructure and availability of labor. And we have also had missing inputs, wherever, in some cases, where we have our own large secondary processing plants or packaged foods, branded manufacturing plants, where we have had gaps in availability of inputs, especially if these raw materials or inputs are imported from other geographies. Next slide, please. So how did we look at it and how did we respond? The first and foremost, what we did at the corporate level is to establish a war room, which had the senior executives of the corporate, as well as key executives from the BUs and functions, to ensure that we are having a holistic outlook on what these disruptions mean for our business worldwide. And then, instead of just focusing on surviving, as most of us would tend to naturally do, we also wanted to simultaneously, concurrently look at how will we thrive when we go through this short-term, hopefully short-term, uncertain times, and have the ability to thrive and prosper. So the focus was not only on addressing the short-term uncertainty and disruptions that were in supply side or in operations, ability to respond to operations difficulties, but also to address demand uncertainty and shock, but also see opportunities simultaneously, concurrently, to see how do we address not only the short term, but also build capability in the long term. And these are some of the risks that I talked about, whether it is the farmers missing the growing season. If the northern hemisphere, this is the planting season, and if, God forbid, the farmers don't have the ability to plant, whether it is due to lack of availability of seeds or lack of availability of agri inputs like in chemicals, fertilizers, packing material, etc., then they may miss the planting cycle, and many of us may not have enough food to eat next year this time. So it is very important, as one of the global agri food operators, that we do our might in ensuring that the farmers have access to seeds, access to other agri inputs, in ensuring that they are able to plant in the normal cycle, which is happening predominantly in northern hemisphere. Similarly, in operations response, where we have had issues because of regulatory lockdowns, fortunately, because of the type of industry we are in most geographies we have got exemption to operate, and that has helped us in terms of looking at how do we leverage on our long-standing relationships with the governments, with the local logistics providers, to ensure access to the local community. The focus has always been, because we have 70,000 employees, the health and safety of employees is of paramount importance, and we have been ensuring that, and also ensuring that we support the local communities on the 60+ countries that we are in. And we are in every country that we are present, our presence is very deep down, right up to many villages and tier 1, tier 2 towns. So our focus has been to support the local community as much as possible. And in terms of demand uncertainty, I will just take 2 quick examples which are of topical interest to this part of the world, and I will probably jump into the next slide. So many of you know, if you're based in Singapore or in Malaysia or in the region, that as part of the COVID-19 regulatory lockdown, Malaysia implemented a movement control order in March, leading to both labor and raw material shortages for our cocoa processing plant, which is based in Tuas in Singapore. It was further exacerbated by Singapore's circuit breaker restrictions, wherein some of the non-essential industries were asked to shut down, who were also providing some inputs to our cocoa processing plant. So how did we respond? First, within the first 48 hours, we had a thorough rethink of the manpower resourcing, because many of our factory workers were coming from across the border, from Johor into Jurong to us, and we did a thorough rethink of the manpower resourcing, and including ensuring that some of the competent administrative staff, whether they can take on shop floor roles. So that was the first response. Second, early during the crisis, we were anticipating some regulatory lockdowns, and then we were already looking to leverage our capacity of our plants in Europe, and ensuring that some of the suppliers who are there in other parts of the continent to supplement Singapore operations. That was the second in terms of leveraging our global presence. The third is we also engaged with Singapore government authorities and Malaysian authorities to ensure that there is continued flow of raw material from across the Malaysian border. And in the process, it was not only about managing the situations in the short term, building alternate capabilities because of our leveraging our global presence, but also ensure that our customers do not have supply chain disruptions in the process. So we clearly built up customer inventories, especially in China and Australia during the last 2 months, to ensure that they have the long-term resilience and have minimal supply chain disruptions from their side. Today, I'm happy to report that our plant in Jurong is running at 75% capacity with minimal supply disruption to our customers. Next slide, please. One more example, which will be again of topical interest. As you know, Singapore government wanted to have significant supply of staples, food staples, for as part of this self-sufficiency drive during this COVID-19 situation. And we were happy to have supported in whatever form we can in supporting the Singapore government to ensure some smooth supply of rice during this crisis. So there was a demand, a request that a large and immediate supply of rice has to be provided for its strategic stockpile as part of this COVID-19 response. And it was complicated because the request was for small SKU size, like 5 kg and 10 kg bags, and also regarding labor shortages. Olam, while it is a large, very large rice supplier, we typically do B2B, and we do large SKUs like 50 kg bags or in bulk, and ship from a variety of Asian geographies like Thailand, Vietnam, India, Pakistan, Myanmar, etc., into Africa predominantly. And trying to react to a situation where to an SKU size like 5 kgs and 10 kgs, and that too in 2 to 3 weeks, was a massive challenge. What we did was again leverage our very strong contacts in Thailand and Pakistan, and we ran 4 simultaneous operations and ensured that all this rice are quality checked and also are packaged in desired SKU size. Now, because of the shortage of time, that 2 to 3 weeks it has to come, we have to also ensure that all of these bill of ladings and everything is available as quickly as possible. So we ensured that we were able to deliver 7,500 tons of rice from Thailand and Pakistan in 5 and 10 kg SKUs within a 3-week time frame, and that too fully quality checked and with pre-approved logistics infrastructure in place. Next slide, please. Finally, this is, I would say, how we have looked at in leveraging our supply chain capabilities across these 4 areas. And I have attempted to make some capability description here. Many of it will be known to you, you'll be aware of it, and will resonate to you when you are looking at these 4 broad areas. In terms of agile network structure, I would like to call out the second point in this, which is called alternative manufacturing and assembly nodes. By being a #1 global cocoa trader and exporter, we have cocoa processing plants across Africa, in Ivory Coast and Ghana, in Asia, in Singapore and Indonesia, in Europe, in Netherlands, Germany and Spain, in the Americas, in the US and in Brazil. Now, because of short-term demand contraction for chocolate consumption, and where our customers are looking at slowing down on some of the pull-in of the commodity, we are actually looking at this as an opportunity and looking at sequential shutdown of our operations across Africa through to Americas, and use this opportunity to refurbish our plants so that post-COVID-19, we are actually very well placed to take on the challenge of increased demand that we forecast. Similarly, if you look at our ability to have empowered organization, I will take the rice example once again. As I was indicating earlier, we have rice sourcing origination, our own operations in Thailand, Vietnam, in India, in Pakistan, and in Myanmar. And what happened was Vietnam in March banned exports of rice. And then sequentially they opened up and had quota system, and that led to rice demand. Now, India, which is already the largest producer of rice, has a bumper crop, and hence the prices of Indian parboiled rice, for example, is actually on a comparative basis to Thai parboiled rice is on a price differential basis 25% cheaper. So because we have significant presence in these countries, have very strong frontline supply and demand ability to forecast, we have been able to take advantage of this situation, and we have already been able to ship a lot of Indian parboiled rice into African destinations rather than trying to only do, which is a BAU situation of shipping Thai parboiled rice. So these, I would say, are very stellar examples in our ability to manage supply chain, have the ability to leverage our global presence, have the team empowered to take decisions on the ground quickly without waiting for any bureaucracy or centralized decision to hinder quick action on the ground. And with that, Pranav, I will go back to you for taking any questions. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for that detailed presentation, Muthu. In terms of questions for the audience, you should see the option to send across your questions in the Q&A tab in the bottom of your Zoom screen. With that, I think I'll start off with the first question. I think one of your slides mentioned that you've seen demand disruption for discretionary commodities. Could you give some sort of a sense of what type of commodities these are and what that demand disruption looks like?
So, for example, many of the commodities which are dependent on out-of-home consumption. So, for example, edible oil, dairy products like full cream powder and skim milk powder, like chocolate manufacturing, because we are one of the largest cocoa ingredients supplier to chocolate manufacturers. These are some of the areas where we believe that, and some cases in packaged food branding business in West Africa, where still biscuits and candies are seen as discretionary consumption, and where we are seeing short-term demand destruction. These are some of the areas where we are seeing this demand uncertainty and shocks.
Got it. Thank you. I think another thing you mentioned was in terms of planting cycles in the Northern Hemisphere and how that can potentially translate into consequences down the line. I think one narrative that's kind of translated in recent weeks has been about deflation because of the demand shock. But one thing that's probably not considered enough is the supply shock of all of this. I'm trying to get a sense for whether there is a risk that we have increasing staple prices in various markets because of disruptions that are either considered today or that are already.
There is genuine concern for what could be a massive supply shock coming in the later part of this year, which will impact 2021. Many of us, while we are focused on the virus outbreak and its resultant impact, are also not equally focused on the locust attack, which is started in Eastern Africa and now threatening to go into some parts of China and India as well. And that's really impacting large, agricultural acreage, which is under production, which is impacting. And that is something which is of very great concern. So that's one which is on the locust attack in this part of the world. I'll take one example to just give you a perspective. In India, as I told you, rice is, they are the largest producer of rice. Typically, they produce between 110 to 112 million tons a year. And they have two crops. There is what you call as summer crop, which is a smaller crop, which is between 10 and 20 million tons. And the winter crop, which is the biggest crop, which comes in November, December, which is between 85 to 95 million tons. Now, typically, most of you will know that rice crop is between 90 and 120 days. That's a cycle time. So the growing, for example, the planting cycle will start somewhere in July, August. right? And if the farmers in India are not having the right material access and also have labor to plant rice to, in June, July, August, imagine 85 million tons to 95 million tons of rice not being produced. Can create a huge issue not only for India but also for the global supply of rice, because India is the largest rice exporter currently. That's one example where we believe that supply shock can be of a greater concern than a demand shock going into the next few months.
Got it. Thank you. We've got a few questions coming in from the audience. Let's get to those. One question, and I read verbatim: how will Olam digitize its operations and use tech solutions to build resilience post COVID-19? What technologies are you and your farmer partners interested in this regard?
There are a variety of things that we are trying to do in digital, and this is not a response to COVID-19 situation. We have been looking at digitizing our supply chain in the last 2 years, and we have made giant strides on those, primarily on a what we call as disintermediation of our supply chain. As you all know, the farmers are probably the most impacted and least rich, if I have to say the term, in terms of the whole supply chain and agri-commodity industry. So they don't get what is due because of a number of intermediaries who are in the supply chain. So historically, it has always been impossible for large corporates to go and directly access farmers because of they own very small land, and your dependability on their ability to grow and then supply to you consistently over time is always suspect. So you inevitably depend on a series of between the farmer and let's say a large supplier like us. Now, the technology has given us access, our ability to go directly to the farmers using smartphones and ensuring that they have first access to transparency to price. The bulk of it is, they don't know the price, they don't know the movement, and they depend on the local intermediary to really guide them on when to sell and what to sell and what to grow and how to grow, and they are perennially in debt. Now, we have been able to do it successfully through our farmer services portal, through very strong examples now in Asia, in India, in Korea, and we believe that now we are in a stage where we are going to expand it to a footprint which will, in 2020, will be upwards of 50,000 people, 50,000 farmers, and can have potential to take on millions of farmers as we go along. But at this stage, we are very, very hopeful that this will dramatically change the way the farmers, the prosperity of farmers will be impacted.
Okay, thank you. I've got quite a few questions coming in, so I'm going to try to club them together if I can. Let's see. One of the questions we've got here is if you've seen any evidence of consumers down trading, indicating pressure on household balance sheets. This could be in terms of varieties of rice, I suppose, or other varieties of commodities, if you're seeing any evidence of the lesser variant being preferred.
So there are, I don't think we can broad brush that people are going to be more price sensitive than quality sensitive. If I have to rephrase that question.
Yep.
And it is a full chain. There are people who are in the one segment, one bookend of consumers will be obviously very cost conscious and will probably in the short term sacrifice quality to price, and that is one. But however, there is a whole amount of people today are worried about safety and health, and those are people who are actually what we call a flight to safety. They are trying to go into known brands, large brands, because for them health is of paramount importance, and they don't want to consume something which they may deem as probably having a risk of safety and health. So I would say that it is not a general trend of going towards cost consciousness, and hence quality consciousness is not there. I think in different geographies, even in a single geography, different bookends, there is differential focus towards price sensitivity and quality sensitivity.
Okay, cool.
We are seeing that across geographies.
Okay. I think another question on the digitalization front is how you address the issue of digitalization when you've got a siloed or disrupted supply chain.
I didn't get the question. Can you repeat it, please?
Of course. It says, how does Olam address the issue of digitalization across a siloed or disrupted supply chain? I think they're talking about if there are bottlenecks in place, in what aspect digitalization helps relieve those stresses.
So early days, I would say, in terms of global supply chains, positively impacted by digital technology. So while there are pilots which have been done using blockchain, where they are trying to minimize freighting time, the documentation that is related to especially marine freight, where a chunk of time is wasted in physically shipping bill of ladings and other related documents in terms of quality documents and regulatory documents, and how one can crash those cycle times by using, for example, blockchain, and where a variety of people, the supplier, the customer, the bank in between, the freight forwarder in between, the shipping agent in between, all of them work together in tandem to ensure that access to these documents securely through digital technology definitely in these times will help. But it is still nascent, and I would say currently the global supply chain is still largely dependent on traditional methods. While there is exciting possibilities for us to do it, and I think every large company is putting in enough efforts and money and time and effort behind how do we leverage digital technology and become a competitive advantage rather than left behind in this race to leverage on digital.
Understood. Another question is regarding logistics. From your perspective, what are the most interesting trends you're seeing there, especially in terms of third-party logistics services? How have they been affected, if you've got any insight on that?
So we have been traditionally a containerized shipment company. 65 to 70% of our cargo, we move roughly 40 million tons of agri commodities in a year, and roughly 65-70% is cargo is containerized, and most of it comes from the emerging markets. The produce is grown in emerging markets and then it is shipped to developing markets for consumption. And historically, all of these emerging markets countries are import dependent for a variety of stuff. So there's a lot of containers that come into these countries and have relative cargo to take out. So exporters like us are always preferred by these third-party freight service providers, because we provide them large access for their containers going back, not going empty, but with cargo. But with now lockdowns happening, we are first time in many years seeing shortage of availability of containers in these countries. So that's one trend. On the bulk side, if you see where we do edible oil and rice and grains, the freight markets collapsed after the COVID-19 outbreak. And we are a very large wheat miller in Western Africa, and we consume more than 1.5 million tons of wheat. And we typically, because these are moved in bulk in large vessels, we are always short on freight. And with the freight market collapsing, we have seen that the access to bulk vessels have become significantly cheaper. Just exactly opposite, where access to containers in emerging markets have become costlier and scarce.
Okay, that's pretty interesting, I think. I believe we're coming up on time, so we will have to wrap up. Muthu, thanks so much for taking the time through running us through Olam supply chain and taking the questions. We will be beginning the next session shortly. Thanks, Muthu.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe and healthy.